Welcome to the confusingly named 10-minute monthly routine training that's actually going to be way longer than that. Not going to put a limit on it yet, but this training is on demand, so hopefully you don't have to wait for the end of the year to do it. You don't have to watch it all at once. If you need to pause it and come back to it, that's totally fine. Just whenever your financial planning journey is ready to start. So, as most of you probably know, I am a yapper. I do like the sound of my own voice, but I know you have important lives to get back to, so I'm going to do my best to respect your time and energy here. We're going to keep this as tight as possible. I will get you out of here in like maximum 60 minutes, but we'll see. Okay, so my goal for the next 60 minutes is to basically teach you my personal financial planning approach to DIYing your money. And then I'm going to get into the weeds of the tool that I developed and use in order to do that effectively in my own life. And so whether you end up using it or not, I think that the structure and the inputs that we're going to talk through will hopefully help you wrap your head around the type of data that I think is important to review regularly in order to make progress. So, to start, let's just quickly review the foundation for why I plan the way that I plan. Because I do not think that budgeting down to the dollar or saving as much as possible with no roadmap is really worthwhile or effective. I would much prefer to ground all my decisions about my finances in a strategic and directional understanding about what those choices mean for the future. It is great if you know that you're spending, a couple $100s a month on streaming services or whatever, or that your rent is $2,000 per month. But that doesn't actually tell you much about your financial health without broader context. So, all of the data that you collect in something like a wealth planner or your tool of choice should be serving a specific purpose for you. And that purpose is translating those financial decisions into outcomes, into timelines. That allows you to make truly informed decisions because now you can understand the trade offs more immediately. There's also kind of an elephant in the room here that I think is worth pointing out, which is that if you don't have enough coming in to meet your needs and to thrive, the issue might be income. And even more precise budgeting and tracking and whatever is not going to do anything to fix that. There are certainly broader forces at play here that impact these decisions and these constraints. And so, my hope is that with everything in front of you clearly, if you can sit down and map it out in the way that we're going to talk about, you will be able to identify what specifically is the best use of your time, whether that is additional tracking or that's, finding a way to negotiate for a higher paying job. So, what do we need to know in order to begin translating our day-to-day money decisions into a strategic system of trade-offs or timelines? We need to know two things. We need to know what is coming in and how much our life costs. And that's really it. Because if we know those two things, that is going to allow us to learn our savings rate, which is all we need to tell us our timeline to financial independence. So, financial independence, you can call it work optionality, you can call it retirement, but if this is a new concept for you, it's basically just the point at which your investments will produce enough income for you to live on. In the traditional financial planning world, this is just called retirement. I like to think of it though as the point at which you could just go without performing additional income producing labor sort of indefinitely and still have enough money to support yourself because you are going to be drawing down little bits and pieces of your investment portfolio. So that's kind of why I consider financial independence to be the ultimate North Star, even if there are a lot of goals that you might be working toward along the way. Because FI is what officially decouples your labor from your income, which is, in my mind, like the absolute freest position that a human could be in. So it is also worth noting, I think, at this point that you will achieve the more colloquial financial freedom or the ability to make decisions without money being your number one consideration long before you reach total financial independence. You're going to reach that probably in the first year or two of making progress. But financial independence is that North Star. This is what I would say my broader planning philosophy is informed by, and what the wealth planner is designed to produce insights about based on your data. But this is kind of my my bread and butter, my favorite thing. On a personal note, this was the concept that changed everything for me financially because I really was like a spendthrift who could not manage a budget. I really couldn't save, mostly because I did not know what the point was, and understanding, really grasping how this works turned me into somebody capable of self-control and long-term planning because it allowed me to realize that what I was buying with the money that I was saving was my own freedom and was my own escape, I guess, from like the strictures of modern life. Obviously, things are a little more complicated than that. And as you know, if you followed me for a long time, my perspective and journey has really changed. But I do credit learning about this concept with getting me on the right track financially. It did really change my life. So you may want to reach this point as quickly as possible, or you might be cool with it taking 40 years. The amazing thing about financial independence math is that it is all proportional. So you get to pick your timeline and then plan accordingly. So your planner is going to do this math for you, as you will see shortly, but like the basic background calculation that all of this is built upon is that your financial independence number, or the amount that you need in investments to be considered financially independent from labor, is roughly 25 times your annual spending. So that's going to give you a big number. I promise you that. If you sit down and figure out what you spend in a year and multiply it by 25, it's going to be large, okay? So what does knowing this information do for us? Well, the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to give us a sense of our goals. It's going to give us a sense of scale. Back in the day, retirement pundits, think like a Susie Orman, used to say that you needed $10 million to retire. It was this like huge blanket number. But calculating this is going to really put things in perspective for you. You might be surprised by your number, either because it's a lot higher or a lot lower than you thought it was going to be. But this is because it was based on your spending, which is related to point number 2, which is that it's going to show us how our current lifestyle is impacting our future in a really direct way. So really the easiest way to think about this calculation or this relationship between spending and investing and like how these things translate to time and freedom is that the more we spend now, the more we need to invest to continue spending that way in the future. But there's a little bit of a like catch-22 there, because the more of your income that you're spending, the less you have to invest. So you want to find that balance that is sustainable and feels good for you based on the timeline that you're most comfortable with, depending on your age or your goals, or, you know, if you want to just like fuck off and go to Paris and write a novel and you're like, I don't want to have to worry about work anymore. Well, maybe that's a pretty motivating reason for you to work really hard toward this. The third thing that it does, and that's kind of related to like how hard you want to work or how much effort you want to put into achieving this, is it's going to contextualize how important or unimportant money should be in your decisions right now. So if you calculate this number and you look at that compared to what you have already in your retirement accounts, your savings accounts, what have you, and you find that you are incredibly far away from work optionality and you want it to go way fucking faster, you're probably going to make different decisions than if you are already halfway there or closer. So when I say closer, far away, I think it's important that we translate this number to a timeline. And we're going to do that today. But on a psychological level, this is important. Understanding this is important because it means the future is not a question mark. It's still uncertain, but we're going to get a little bit of directional accuracy, which I find very reassuring. So, of course, if you've already calculated your number, you know that it's probably $1 million or more, and that's a lot of money. And in order to accumulate a number that large to ensure your own safety and security in the future, you basically do not have a choice about whether you're going to invest that money in something. You cannot keep it in cash because cash loses value pretty much every year at varying speeds depending on the rate of inflation. You have to use that money to buy assets. So for me personally, buying low-cost index funds was the way that I chose to pursue financial independence. Some people invest in real estate, other people invest in small businesses, more active investing, basically. But for me, as someone that was working full-time and had multiple jobs, I didn't have the time to do the like real estate small business thing. For me, low-cost index funds were the best option. They were the most passive option. And if they are the best option for you, and you are pursuing financial independence, it might be worthwhile to know that the model portfolio that Bill Bengen, the man who effectively discovered the 4% rule in financial planning, which gave us this fine math that we are using, based his calculations on this portfolio. Not originally, by the way, back in the 90s, it was just a 2-asset class portfolio, but he has since expanded it and diversified in this way. And this is kind of the most updated 2025 and forward allocation. I would also say this is now the time to chant silently to yourself. This is not investment advice. Past performance is not indicative of future returns. I would be remiss not to tell you that, because obviously the world is a place that changes rapidly. We have no idea what the future holds, but based on the historical analyses that were done, this is the portfolio allocation that Bill Bengen, the godfather of financial independence, recommended. If you want to go something a little simpler, and I have actually personally taken this path because I think managing allocations that are this specific was just a little more detailed than I wanted to manage personally. You can just go ahead and do a 70% domestic stock, 30% international stock breakdown. I think that that's kind of like largely understood in the FI world right now to be kind of the optimal mix. You'll also notice that there's a lot of government bonds in this portfolio. So this is an extremely risk-averse portfolio, and probably more risk-averse than I would choose to be. I am in 100% equities, which is very aggressive, very risky. But it's the 70-30 domestic international split. So just another message here. This is 55% stocks, 45% bonds and cash. This is probably going to be too risk averse for almost everybody under 50, and honestly, a lot of people over 52. But I wanted you to see it because I want you to get an appreciation for the amount of diversification and like proportionality between the funds that he was pointing out. You'll also notice there's no crypto, there's no individual stocks. You're going to get enough tech exposure in your S&P 500, your US large cap fund. You don't need to add more with additional single tech stocks. The other thing that I want to say before I take you through some of these inputs in this routine is that there are a couple other things in your financial life that definitely do need to take priority over investing. So even if you are excited to start contributing aggressively to an investment account, you're excited to start working toward FI, which #relatable, you want to make sure that these 3 boxes are checked first. So the first is your cash cushion. I would recommend at least 2 to 3 months worth of your expenses minimum, but your mileage may vary. So the rule of thumb that I kind of point people to is if you are a childless renter, or childless or a renter, take your pick, you can usually get away with just 3 months of emergency fund expenses. But if your lifestyle situation more closely resembles the homeowner with kids bucket, whether because you own a home or you have kids or both, you probably need to be closer to 6. Your liabilities are going to be greater. There's more room for things to go wrong in that type of life, and you have dependents, right? If you're self-employed, you might decide to strive for closer to 12. But I probably would not say get close to 12 unless you are like a self-employed homeowner with kids, where you really need to make sure you have that cushion underneath you. I say that because I think sometimes people sit in cash on the sidelines for too long. They get really comfortable saving, they get really good at saving, and then it's kind of hard to make that mental switch from just saving and putting the cash away to actually investing it in assets and kind of putting some cash on the table, so to speak. So unless you have very unique circumstances, I would say 12 is going to be the absolute maximum with like every single risk factor turned on, and 2 to 3 is going to be the minimum. The next thing is contributing enough to get your full 401k or 403b or, whatever you have access to match, because that is a 100% return on investment. I personally always contribute the maximum allowed to my 401k that I can afford, but that's because I want the tax break. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that in the wealth planner shortly and how that kind of gets calculated. And then lastly, any high interest debt. So this means debt with an interest rate that's more than roughly 6 or 7%, give or take. Mostly we're talking about credit card debt here, which is going to be in the teens or 20s. I do accept mortgage debt from this calculation because mortgage rates right now are over 6% for people that have taken out loans in the last couple of years. And I definitely do not want you to wait 30 years to begin investing. So if you have a mortgage rate that's like 6 and change, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, hey, I had a really bad car repair and I had to put it on a credit card that I'm still paying off and there's $5,000 left on it. You want that to come first before you start investing in the stock market. So with all that said, I want to take you through an actual tool that I personally use, that I developed in tandem with Emma, Excel Dictionary. Take what you want, leave what you don't, right? This is the way that I have found works best for me with my DIY financial planning. And if you want to do it yourself, obviously this is hopefully going to be inspiring, give you some pointers, maybe some new ideas, but your situation and personality needs may differ. So I'm just going to show you the tool that I use, and we are going to walk through that now. And hopefully seeing a lot of these inputs is going to be useful for you. Okie dokie, we switch over to our example wealth planner. Okay, so this is the tool. Basically, the dashboard tab that you're looking at here is the brains of the operation. So anything that I'm talking about here is data that you should think about as like, okay, these are my basic inputs that I want to know if I'm going to build myself a plan. So we start with income. This is like step number one. We have to understand what is coming in. So in the wealth planner, there's a place for you to actually name those sources of income. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. I personally like to name the source of income and then put the amount that I'm expecting from it, because that helps me fill out this, which is the tax liability table. And I'll just add these up and go, okay, what am I expecting to bring in this year? What's the income that I think I'm going to see? So this is going to kind of help you figure out your tax liability and how your deductions come into play. So this is what I would recommend you do first, is look at your income and then figure out what of that you're actually keeping and if there's a way to keep more of it. And so the way that you do that is looking at your pre-tax paycheck investments. If you are somebody that works for somebody else and your employer offers you a investment plan through your work where you can make pre-tax investments with money before it comes to you, this is what you're going to put here. Typically, this is going to be like a 401k, a 403b, a 457, things of that nature. But the way that I like to think about this is kind of like a flow chart going down. So you have 115 here. Let's say you have, you can put in your non-taxable income if you have stipends or if you have disability, things that don't get taxed. So it'll, know to kind of set that aside. Self-employment portion here, let's say 25,000 of this is self-employment. That's going to affect what kicks back below. And then let's say you're going to put 10,000 in a pre-tax investment account. I just actually want you to see what happens. So before we invest anything in a pre-tax account, our estimated federal tax liability is around $9,439 per year. Let's say we put in 15,000. Now our tax liability just dropped by almost $2,000. So I do want you to kind of think about, all right, what am I able to keep, net keep, even if some of it is ending up in a pre-tax investment account? What am I able to keep on my side of the ledger by using these pre-tax accounts? You'll also have a space for other pre-tax and post-tax deductions. So like if you pay for health insurance premiums that are $1,000 a month, like ours, you can put those here. And then it's going to give you just your tax breakdown. So I always think it's just nice to understand this at a baseline level. And there are other tax calculators that you can use for this, but it'll tell you your marginal rate and it'll tell you your effective rate, AKA what overall percentage of your income is going to go to taxes. Most people's effective tax rates are actually much lower than they realize. I learned this stat the other day that 80% of Americans pay more in payroll taxes, which is this, your FICA taxes, that 7.65% that comes out of your paycheck, pay more in payroll taxes than federal income taxes, which is just wild. Hashtag tax reform now. Okay. And then what's going to happen over here? So you'll see this. I want you to think about your income, what's coming out, what you're holding on to, kind of in this way. So I'm going to zoom in one more time. This is a section that I think really, really helps when you are trying to get the scaffolding around a first budget or a plan where you have a lot of inputs. So you see your gross income month over month. You see the tax liability for that income. And then it's going to tell you, all right, so post-tax, this is what you can expect. And your paycheck deductions, this is what's already coming out. So your take-home pay, I actually think I wrote over this when I was playing around with it. Pretend this isn't here. But typically in a blank file, and one that I haven't already manhandled to death, there's a formula in this box, and it's going to tell you what your take-home pay is. But the point in writing over it was I wanted to show somebody that you could change it, and it would adjust the monthly breakdown down here. So if this number for any reason is not accurate, like typically the reason it wouldn't be accurate is that your withholding at work is incorrect. So you're either withholding too much or not enough. Usually people withhold too much. But basically, you're going to get a tax refund. So if you're somebody that always gets a tax refund, this number is going to be higher than you're probably used to seeing. It's just because you are taking that money back during tax season rather than taking it throughout the year on your paycheck. So just a fun fact there. But if you don't feel like changing your withholding at work, you can actually just write over this and say, hey, I want to plan with this amount of take-home pay. Another reason that sometimes people will change this number is if they get a lot of commission income or bonus income, or maybe they're self-employed and they're like, yeah, I want to see my total tax liability based on my real income, inclusive of everything. I do want to know what I am paying in taxes and know this data about myself, but I don't want to plan for that number. I don't want to plan according to those bonuses or commissions or big checks that might not actually come in. So some people will actually just change this to be the base pay amount that they want to budget with. So the reason that this matters and the reason that we want to know this is because this little section is kind of like, I would call it the engine for the rest of the budget. And you can build something like this yourself. But I think the interesting piece here is looking at your goal savings rate. So typically, I always tell people start with 20 or 25% here and see if it's doable. If you earn a lot of money, you're probably going to find that it actually is quite doable. If you are somebody who is earning closer to a median income, that's probably going to be pretty difficult. Although I have met people that I don't know how they do it, just like Herculean levels of discipline. They save 15, 20% on below median incomes. It's extremely, extremely impressive. But when you click into here and you set your goal savings rate, it is going to change what comes up down here. So 25%, it's actually also looking at your post-tax income. I should say that. That's important. I would always judge your savings rate based on the income that you are actually receiving or the income that would be yours were it not going into paycheck deductions rather than looking at gross income, because you don't get to decide what happens to all your gross income. The government decides what happens to a chunk of that. So it's going to tell you, all right, this is the goal, right? This is how much you want to save total per month. This is what you've already saved from your paycheck. It's going to look at these paycheck investments over here. So cool, knock that out. The amount that you have left to save that you are responsible for in order to hit a 25% post-tax savings rate is $769. Then it's going to kind of break down the rest of this for you proportionally depending on what you click here. So here's your goal housing amount. This is all housing should fall into this number. Goal transportation. Some people kind of reallocate these depending on their situation and whether they need a car or not. Goal living expenses and then goal discretionary income. So it's going to kind of give you that scaffolding. I think that's the best word for it. Let's say you wanted to save 40%. No. Now we're looking at a totally different situation, but again, you've already saved $1,250. So now our goal total savings, if we want to save 40% of our post-tax income, which I believe works out to about 20 years to FI if you're starting from nothing. There's a chart in Rich Girl Nation that you should look at if you want to kind of see how it connects. And then it's going to adjust these accordingly. So you'll see 400 got taken off housing. about 200-ish got taken off transportation, so on and so forth, and it gets reallocated to the savings thing where, okay, now 1900 of what's coming home needs to be saved if you want to hit a 40% savings rate. So I always think that this is a good place to start. It's going to give you the big picture. You want to start with what's coming in, what is the savings rate that I'm trying to hit based on how quickly I want to reach FI. I should look at Rich Girl Nation and tell you what page that chart's on, but it'll say, if this is how many years you want it to take, this is the savings rate you should shoot for. And then it's just kind of plug and play. We're going to zoom back out. Okay. So these little pie graphs just intended to show you kind of visually where money is going. Like, here's your income tax breakdown, net income versus federal, payroll, and self-employment in this particular example. And then you're going to go through and using this kind of helper guide. Obviously, some of this is not going to be up to you. You probably already have rent and it is probably already above whatever limit it's going to tell you it should be. But you are going to put in your budget. So the reason that I kind of have it laid out this way is because most people, it's kind of actually hard to think through if you've never made a budget before or you've never mapped out your spending, what specifically you should be planning for. So every category, I just included like the I don't know, 12 most popular categories that people have. And then each one has little subcategories. So like, you know, with childcare, babysitter, nanny, au pair, sports, entertainment, tuition, etc. for family, hopefully that's going to jog your memory of like, okay, this is what we need to pay for. And then you can use this little edit button down here if you need to add something new or personalize something, but you've got that across 12 major categories. And then after you have figured out, okay, what's going out, you can make this calculation yourself if you wanted to, but it's going to tell you, all right, what is expected monthly spending total? What are my goal payments, my goal debt payments rather? And then what am I expected to be able to save based on everything that I put up here? So that's just simple subtraction, right? Okay, we know what's coming in. We know the net income. What are we expected to save? And then it's going to say, hey, as a reminder, this was the goal based on that savings rate you wanted to hit. So you can kind of compare, ooh, okay, I'm like 700 off. Anything up there that can go, or like, do I need to adjust the savings rate goal? Before I move on to this, investing section down here, I also just want to show you this irregular bills section, which is something that we added this past year. This is essentially just something where if you have known expenses, but that do not happen on a monthly basis, it will normalize them for you. So here's car insurance. That's a very popular example. Usually car insurance is twice per year. You'll put the upcoming payment date, and then you can tell it, do you want it to create the savings goal for you, which it'll do down here, and say, all right, well, then if it's $500 twice a year, you need to set aside $83 a month for that. Or if you, let's do like a property taxes thing. When do people pay property taxes? Is that quarterly? Housing, let's say that's like quarterly. And then let's say our next upcoming payment date is on the 30th. So depending on when the payment date is, it'll tell you, hey, okay, that's like 2 weeks away, girl. Like you got to actually have all that money now. Or if it's 3 months away, it'll normalize for you depending on when the next payment is and then readjust from there. You can also just click just add the expense, and then it won't add a savings goal. It'll just put it in the correct month so that you see it as an expense in that monthly tab. But I'm going to click create a savings goal so you can see how that works. And then this number sometimes throws people off, but the point now, I think, is that you want to know how much money you have left to allocate. So you know how much you've spent. This actually also went up because we added our irregular bills that happen on a weird cadence. And so now our monthly savings went down. But again, this is going to do all that math for you. You can also just pencil this out. It's not that complicated. And then this is telling you, all right, this is what's left to allocate to savings and investments. People are like, why is this number higher than this number? It's because it includes this. It wants you to put in that $1,250 and tell the planner, okay, that 401k that we said we're putting, $1,250 a month in, it wants you to put it here so that you can actually see how much of your income is going into that investment. So it's not, and basically like where it's going. So it's not going to put that down there for you. You have to add that. Okay. So really, I think the takeaway here, if whether you're using this tool or building it, yourself, also let me delete that. That was not supposed to be there, but Whether you are building this yourself or using this tool, the point is that once you figure out what's going out and what you have coming in, you're kind of making a plan for your investments, and you're going, okay, what is reasonable based on what I want to spend, and where do I want that money to go? And then every month you will kind of check that box every month that you have made the contributions that you intended to make. So in this example, we've got $1,250 going into this 401k, and we know we have $1,033 left to allocate from our savings because now we've already put our $1,250 in here for that 401k. So maybe we're saving up in a high yield savings account for something. Again, our monthly savings goals for our irregular expenses have already been covered, so we don't have to worry about that. That's been factored in. Say we're going to do $500 into the high yield savings, and then maybe the $533 that remains into the IRA. So now we've got a plan, right? We know we're going to spend on average between regular and irregular $5,200 a month, and then we know we've got $500 going into this high yield account, we've got $533 going into this IRA, and then we've got $1,250 going in. This is going to bother me because this should be Roth because you can't. Okay. Like that's gonna bug me because that's IRS. That's an IRS rule breaker right there. $533 going in. You also just want to make sure you're clicking actively contributing in here if you are using this tool, because this is what's going to tell the planner which investment accounts to resurface in every monthly tab. But you'll fill out every account you have here. So most people use a dozen plus rows here to capture every account they have, and you're going to enter a starting balance. So if you are just starting on your financial journey, or you are trying to kind of get your arms around your financial situation, sitting down and just mapping out, these are the places that I have money. Go sit down with all the passwords one day. It's going to be annoying as shit, but you got to do it. Just spend the hour, get logged in, do all the two-factor authentication where they're going to text you all the little 6-digit codes. Get in there, see how much money is in each of those accounts, and create a catalog of where that money is and how much is there. This starting balance column is where you're going to do that in my tool, but it's up to you. And then down here, you have a debt payoff strategizer. So if you are somebody for whom the comment that I made in the earlier presentation is true of like, yep, got high interest debt, we're knocking it out, you're going to go ahead and let's see, I think I put it right here. Yeah, debt number 1. Let's say like car maintenance CC bill. Okay. And we're putting $200 a month toward that, let's say. So that's recurring. That's a debt payment. It's in our budget. But then down here, you're going to see that car maintenance bill pop up. You are going to enter the interest rate and the total amount owed. And then monthly payment is something that you can change. Actually, this shouldn't be blue, but 200. Okay. So you can tweak this and you can say, I want to put, I want to see what happens. Like right now, it's going to take me 2.5 years to pay it off, and I'm going to pay $1,200 in interest. What if I threw an extra $50 toward it? Then what happens? Ooh, okay, now I'm saving $700 in interest. That's amazing. And it takes me 2 years. All right, what if I can do $275? And you can see how the interest paid changes and how the payoff time in years changes. So you might go, all right, fuck it, we ball, $275, that's what we're doing. You're going to come back up here and you'll just update it. There's that. And then everything else will change and you'll go, all right, well now I have 120 less for that investment account or this, whatever. That's a bummer, but got to do what you got to do. Okay. And then any real estate that you own, you'll put that here. So again, the idea is that you're basically taking the abstraction of your financial life as it exists across a bunch of different accounts and then a bunch of different places and a bunch of different bills, and you are just putting it all in one tab. This is the brains of the operation. This is the part that's going to take you the longest, whether you use my tool or someone else's. But getting everything down for the first time, hopefully you'll only have to do it once. And then from there, that's where we get that like easy monthly magic of like, hey, 10-minute check-in routine. We're coming in, we're updating these numbers, and like, that's it. So in my tab, it's going to calculate, or in my tool rather, the net worth tab is going to calculate your net worth for you. It's going to say, all right, this is what you've got in cash. This is investments. This is how it breaks down between pre-tax and Roth. Here's your real estate equity. It's going to calculate that for you. Total net worth, $845. Pretty good. Pretty dang good. But if you want, you can hide rows. So if you really do only have like a couple of accounts, that's good on you for being organized. You can highlight all the rows and then hide them. So it's not so long, but I've seen people use every single row, which is wild. So all of this is going to calculate for you automatically. And then what you are going to do as part of your 10-minute monthly routine is you are going to go into your file and you are going to update the balances in those accounts. I personally like to use an app called Copilot to like have all the accounts logged in one place. So I'm not having to go log into every single financial provider. It's just all in Copilot, and it'll update automatically in Copilot. So then I take that data and I insert it here. Copilot is a real-time estimate, and you can look back on the account data, but I just find that for me personally, for whatever reason, I prefer to have a spreadsheet where I like to be able to go back and go, what was in this account in 2022? How much progress have I made since July 2023? I like to be able to go back into old files and kind of compare and contrast. And for whatever reason, it just makes me feel more comfortable to like have a record that I own of how these accounts have changed. This is where the magic happens. This is the part that I would say is not possible to rebuild yourself unless you want to pay Emma tens of thousands of dollars to do it for you like I did, but that's what this is. So this is the financial independence tab. This is where the magic happens. This is what I think really sets my tool apart from everybody else's who has, created financial planning tools of this nature. It's going to tell you, based on all the stuff that we put in this dashboard tab, all right, current long-term invested assets, which you will see when you fill out an investment account. It's going to give you a timeline choice. So only those that you have selected are for long-term FI will appear in that FI tab. If you are saving for like 529 for college or brokerage account for a house, a medium-term big investing goal, it's not going to count that. You just have to tell it, hey, is this money something that this planner should look at for FI? Or like, are you planning to use it soon? So once you get into this FI tab, it's going to look at that. So look at your current income, your current spending, and your current effective tax rate. And basically what you're going to see when you go into this tab is, when am I currently slated to reach financial independence based on all of that, based on the long-term investments that I'm planning to make, based on what my lifestyle costs, etc. Right now, this person is 11 years out, which is amazing. I love when people tell me they get to this tab and it's like, holy shit, I'm so close. That is the best feeling in the world. It's just like the weight lifts. And it's going to tell you, all right, this is your projected FI number, very like exact, right? Based on your current spending, but with the average income increases, the rate of return that you want to bank on, the inflation rate that you want to bank on. And you can make all of this more conservative. This is, I think 393 is what it'll put in just as like the default setting, but you can take any of those in any direction you want based on how your life you think is going to pan out. And then if you are somebody that has children or you have kids in daycare right now, you can always put in temporary major monthly expenses. So let's say you have $2,000 a month going into daycare. You can put $2,000 here and then the start year and the end year, and it'll factor that in. So it'll assume, oh, okay, so we're going to spend more and invest less in these years, but then once this expense ends, it's going to take that back out. One thing that I want to note just as like a proof point here is, with choose your start date in this first tab, if this is something that you are already paying for, like childcare, theoretically it's going to be in your budget and it's going to start in the year that the planner starts. So when you go into the FI tab, if it's an expense that you currently have that you have already budgeted for, it doesn't need to add it in. It just needs to know when to take it out. So you want to make sure that if it is something that is already in the budget, that the start year on that expense begins in the same year as the planner. Whereas if it's something that you're expecting to pay for in the future, now it needs to add that into the budget you've already made. It's like a net new thing that it needs to factor in. So, the start year will be sometime in the future and the expense won't yet be in the budget that you've already made. Then you've got some Social Security. You can put in, when you expect to receive Social Security. If you're getting a pension, we have 2 spots for pensions. And then if you want it to remove debt payments from your expenses when your debt is paid off, click yes. Basically what that's going to do is, if you have a bunch of debt payments here that you are chipping away at, This calculator will tell you, it's basically telling you and the planner, hey, this is when this expense is going to go away. Checking this just means that it's going to remove that debt payment from your budget in the year that it is paid off, so that it's not continuing to factor it into your expenses in the future. And then you have room for, like, if you're going to make a major one-time purchase from your long-term investments, usually this is like a down payment, or if you are expecting like a big windfall of some kind, you can actually add that in too, and it'll do like a one-time deposit at some point in the future. You can select your safe withdrawal rate, and then if you want to see what happens to your investments after you retire and you are no longer contributing to them, you can pick which year you want your income to zero out, and then that will begin, the chart will effectively shift so that it's taking your expenses from the invested balance versus assuming it's coming from income, and you can kind of see how the balance would change over time as you are drawing money from it every year. Okay, cool. So this is something that, like, you're probably going to look at when you first set it up. Maybe you'll keep coming back to it, but it's based on what's in this dashboard tab. So as you're updating it monthly, it's not going to be changing according to like month to month fluctuations. It's an annual tool. It's looking at the big picture. It's looking at, it's thinking in years, not in weeks or months. So if you decide that you want to reach 5 faster and you want to see like what that's going to take, what you're going to want to do is change the inputs here. So change the income, change the investment contributions, or change the spending. And then that is what this is going to react to. Okay, so we're almost done. On the note of the 10-minute routine that you're going to do. So we already talked about every month you're going to come in, you're going to update the numbers in the net worth tab. You're also going to fill out your monthly tab. So each month of the year has a tab depending on when you start it. Like in this planner, December is month 1. So you see December in month 1. If you were to change this and say, actually, I want it to be April 2026, now month 1 is going to be April. So just something to note there. But you're going to come in and you're going to update your income. So you'll say, all right, income number 1 source, I got this much money from that. Income number 2 source, I clocked this much money from that. And then you're going to fill out, okay, budgeting wise, what did we expect to spend? What did we actually spend? You'll put in those totals. And then same down here with, okay, we know that we put our 401k 1250. Now that we've selected the account, the goal will pop up. And then we also know that we want to contribute to a Roth IRA and our Betterment high yield savings. So contribution will appear here. Your goal will appear here. You'll actually put in the contribution. So every month you're saying, yep, I did that. If you didn't do it, no problem. You'll just put 0. And then it's going to track over time, okay, how is your saving and investing going? And as you fill this out, this chart will populate. Then you'll see down here savings for regular bills. So those insurance things, the property taxes, we know that we need to set aside. The property taxes is big, right? Because it's happening this month. It's the full 1,000. But for the car insurance, it's just okay, we've put our 125 in. All right, we're 25% of the way there. The next month we'll put in the next one. But it's basically just a chance for you to go in and say, okay, looking back at the month of April, what did we spend? What did we invest? What did we contribute where? Did we hit our savings goals for the expenses that are happening in the next couple of months? What have you? And then any unexpected expenses that pop up that like don't fit in the budget or that you want to exclude from the budget for any reason. This could be something that, like, I don't know, maybe you're going to get reimbursed for work, or for whatever reason it's like so outrageous, like a huge tax bill in April. Perfect example, that you don't want it to like be factored into the budget that this is tracking for you. Okay, so once you fill that out every month, you're going to do that for all 12 months. You can also use this expense tracker tab if you would like to. So some people, I mentioned Copilot. I use Copilot and let everything aggregate in there because I'm spending across a bunch of different accounts and credit cards. And then I just put the totals in for my different categories. But if you are someone that likes to track like bit by bit by bit, expense by expense, you're going to click into this, say what date something was spent on, transportation. I actually didn't add any subcategories, but you'll select the subcategory, the amount, and then any notes that you want. So if you want like a really detailed map of what's coming in and what's going out, you can use this expense tracker. And then what it's going to do is auto calculate for you in the month that that expense happened. So you'll put in all your expenses all month long, and then actually you're filling out the category part is you don't have to do that because it's going to do that for you. So it's either you're putting it in at the end of the month, just the totals that another app is telling you, or you're going to track it yourself manually. It would be interesting. I kind of am like curious if my behavior would change if I had to track manually, but I honestly don't think that I could pull that off. I think I spend too much for that. I think or maybe not too much, but like I think I transact too frequently that I'm just like something would get missed for sure. Okay, so all 12 months get filled out, and then at the end of the year, you get a year in review. So this year in review is going to tell you your total income from all sources. It's going to tabulate that, the total spent between regular and irregular bills, your total unexpected expenses, total saved and invested, the growth of your net worth. That's always a fun one during bull markets because you'll see that what you contributed pales in comparison to how your net worth changed. Very exciting. How much you put toward debt, and then how much you excluded. So if you like get here and it's like, ooh, I'm spending a lot more than I thought, and I'm just like checking the box to exclude it, you'll see that too. You'll also see like how you ended up spending compared to what you planned, and then total contributions to all your investment accounts. And then down here, you'll see your just some other like trends and insights based on what you entered. So really, I think the high level here, I like this year in review tab. I think it's very helpful. I will often, like at certain points in the year, go in and just check in. You can change the review period, telling it what month you want it to start in and what month you want it to end in if you're trying to get like a specific window. But I think the important thing that I would say is high level. 10 minutes a month is really all it should take you to go in and like enter this kind of data. Okay. Did I make the investment contributions? For me personally, this is like usually when I make them is when I go in to update this and I go, oh yeah, I gotta move that money. Okay, let me do that now. So it's a nice little accountability exercise. It shouldn't take long to fill this out on a monthly basis, and it's going to give you that data over time. Same with the net worth update. But this part for everybody, whether you use this tool or another one, is always going to take the longest amount of time. And that is actually sitting down, looking at your income, looking at your taxes, figuring out what you're keeping, choosing a save rate, setting a spending plan, figuring out what other irregular bills you have and like how you need to be preparing for them, and then figuring out where all your money is and how it breaks down. And sometimes when you look at this net worth tab or when you actually calculate what you have and where it is, you find that like, oh, I have like no Roth exposure, or I have no pre-tax, or I'm like actually really low on cash. And seeing the whole picture can help you figure out where you need to be devoting your energy. So whether you use the wealth planner or you build something similar for yourself, I think that that first step is like, you got to psych yourself up for it. You got to psych yourself up to do all the two-factor authentication and to sit down and get it all on paper. But no matter what you find, 9.5 times out of 10, people tell me they are glad they did it, even if they weren't excited about what they saw on the paper in front of them. Just doing it and seeing and making the plan made them feel better. So that's the 10-minute routine that took 47 minutes to explain. And go forth and prosper in peace, love, and compounding. You got this.